The music, the songs of Stephen Collins Foster. He was born in 1826 and he died in 1864, a year and a half before the end of the Civil War. And he wasn't yet 38. And then later how he died, he was the same age I think as Schubert, but very different to Schubert. Stephen Foster was one of the, I think he's credited to be the first of the great professional songwriters, in the sense that he wrote music and sold the sheet music for the parlour singing that went on at that particular time. It was Victorian times in the United States, the same as it was back in Britain. People met and they sang. Genteel society, the middle classes who had used the piano, sang these rather genteel songs. But for all that, he didn't always write these genteel songs. He was a master melodist, and he set various pieces of other verse and poetry to music by other people, and also to words that he wrote himself. So he's really versatile. He was born in near Pittsburgh, lived a lot of the time in Cincinnati, and later, and up to his death, he lived in New York. Now, I'll just say one thing, and we can mention it later in relation to the Civil War. His early part of his career, he wrote a lot of the songs for the blackface minstrel shows that were always going around in the North. They, while a lot of people knew slavery existed in the South, most of the population of the North were never in the South. And they had a romanticised view of it. Negro minstrels, or to excuse me for the word, but nigger minstrel shows were going around in blackface, singing songs, and people like the Christy Minstrels were the most well-known groups then. In fact, they were formed in Britain. Oddly enough, it came back, and it lasted about 1870, the black and white minstrel show. It was very hard to stamp out, but it was, anyway, very, before the early part of his career, up to about the early 1850s, he wrote a lot of those. And you all know them: Oh Susanna, Won't You Cry For Me, and Old Black Joe, My Old Kentucky Home, all these things sentimentalizing the life in the South, which was no bed of roses. But they were singing, these makey-uppy blacks were singing songs and making out that they were very happy down on the old plantation. And that's where I laboured so hard for old Massa, working all day in those fields of yellow corn, making it sound as a grand picnic, and that's the way it went. But that got very sour after about 1852, which I'll come back to later. But anyway, to come back to this particularly highly prized record I have, I had an old LP from the early 1970s, and I was able to find that it was issued in the United States of recent times and added to by a record label named Nonesuch, which specializes in American music, and did various collections of songs of Stephen Foster and by other American songwriters. Now, it's very special to me that two wonderful singers in it. Leslie Gwynn is what I think is a beautiful baritone. I'd love to have your opinion afterwards. And the soprano is Jan de Gattani. The accompaniment is on piano by Gilbert Kalish, but also a collection of instruments like the melodeon. The melodeon isn't this kind of melodeon. It was a spinet kind of a thing, operated by a pump handle and a rudimentary organ for use in domestic music making. Bugles and violin come in and out of the thing as well. But they are sung all to Stephen Foster's own written arrangements. And they're very simple and very suitable, because strongly feel that a lot of the more recent arrangements of Stephen Foster are too modern, too slushy, and don't for me recall the period they were written for. The instruments are all period instruments taken from the Smithsonian Institution in Washington. That's enough for a start. Incidentally, I apologise in advance. It's necessary to speak a little about the period and the Civil War which is coming up. But the first one you'll all be familiar with because it was sung in our concert that we had featuring Norris, and there's a good time coming. It was written, the music was written by Stephen Foster to words by Charles Mackay, a Scots poet who flourished in the early part of the 19th century. But there's a good time coming. It looks forward, it looks ahead to a time when things will be better in the world. Things like shameful rivalries of creed shall not make the martyr bleed. And we're always waiting for that to happen. And now we're worried about the Islamists getting onto that kick. And little children shall not toil under or above the soil, you know, in the good time that's coming. Anyway, this is sung by Leslie Gwynn, and we'll start with that one, and then we'll go on to the second two. We'll take them in twos after that. But let's open. This is the beautiful voice of Leslie Gwynn. Anyway, the next one is sung by Janda Gitani, the soprano. Oh, may the red rose live always. It's again a very sentimental song, very the period. He went in a lot for sentiment. People were very sentimental those days. Tearjerker song, sadness. That's because of there was a lot of debt. There was a lot of infant death at the time. A lot of children died in infancy, and very few families were spared 1, 2, or even 3 children that lived beyond 3 or 4 because of diseases and everything, and it made everybody very sad. And then there were other things that carried people away. But there's also a general melancholy around, which was very typical of the Victorian era. Sung by Janda Gitani, but she sings it very beautifully. And then 11 after that, Ollie, will be Beautiful Dreamer, 1864 is the date for that. That came out in 1864, published a few days before the death of Stephen Foster. And that's sung by Leslie Gwynn again. So, may the red rose bloom always, first Ollie. Which dates from 1851. And it's Wilt Thou Be Gone, Love. Stephen Foster set, you're all have done Romeo and Juliet in school and everything, we all know the plot. From the balcony scene when the two sweethearts are meeting together, and Romeo is terrified that her people, the rivals, her people want to get a hold of him and give him the old stiletto, and she wants him to stay and sort of put him at his ease, but he's convinced that the light he sees in the sky is the dawn, and the boys will be arriving looking for him, and she's saying to him, no, that's the night sky, and what you hear is the nightingale. He says, no, what I hear is the lark. That lark gets up in the morning and I'm off. So he wants to get away, and this is a setting of that in the form of duet. I think it's very effective, and it's a really great duet for a male and female singer. And the next one is, oh yeah, the name of that is Wilt Thou Be Gone, Love. And then a comic one, if you'll only get a moustache, from 1864. I think it was published after his death. And this is a comic song about anybody who wants to get successful, grow a moustache, because you get interest and you'll get influence and cash if you grow a moustache, and be a great success with the girls if you'll only grow a moustache. It's hard to get the words in the song, but that's sung by Janda Gitani. A duet first, and then the soprano Janda Gitani sings if only you'll get a moustache. Anyway, here's two songs about sleeping. You'll be very familiar, this next one. It's Leslie Gwynn again. It's Sweetly She Sleeps, My Alice Fair, from 1851. Again, he sings it most beautifully. And there's Jan Catani next. Slumber, My Darling, 1862. It's a sweet little lullaby, and beautifully sung in each case, I think. Thank you. Again, reflecting this melancholy which was at the heart of Victorian times. A lot of people died young wives in childbirth, and a lot of infant mortality, as I'm sure all you know would know in those days. The very poignant song, Gentle Annie, bit of a tearjerker really, but it's so beautifully melodic that it's sung well by Leslie Gwynn. And then some folks, this is from 1855, some folks, it's a philosophical kind of thing, some folks toil and save, some folks do, to buy themselves a grave, but that's not me nor you, you know. It's for an optimistic kind of song, but again, it's a duet. The CD is that there are plenty of pieces on it that simply never heard today. You know, they seem to have passed out of the repertoire and they resurrected there. So the final bit for the moment, unless you want to hear ones later on, of general pieces that he wrote, with Beautiful Dreamer from 1864. Again, it came out just around the time of his death, and that's sung by Leslie Gwynn. Again, he was in a very melancholy humour towards the end of his life, 1864. He had fallen into serious alcoholism, and no harm to mention it now, but he had become estranged from his wife. He had a strained relationship anyway right throughout, but he had a serious alcohol problem, and one night in his house he fell down in the horrors of drink, glass broke, cut him on the neck here, and it didn't last long after that, became infected and everything, and he shuffled off the mortal coil in 1864 before he was yet 38 years of age. And this is just about the end of his life. Beautiful Dreamer.